Despite being blessed with sons named Joshua and Ethan, they became overly attached to Susan, who had filled their heads with falsehoods, leading them to neglect their parents. Sometime after Susan, Joshua, and Ethan were kicked out of the house, George passed away suddenly. When I informed Joshua over the phone, his response was unbelievable. "Your dad passed away. Leave the funeral stuff to you, Mom. I don't want to see the face of someone who kicked us out. Yeah, and we're having a great time here, so don't bother us. Just tell the relatives we can't make it because of work or something." I was dumbfounded. A week after the funeral, I received a letter from George addressed to me. When I opened it, it read, "Please read this without our sons finding out." As I read on, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Susan had trampled over our family life with dirty shoes, and Joshua and Ethan refused to attend their father's funeral. I won't let it end like this. My name is Alice, a 54-year-old housewife and full-time employee. I met George at a welcoming party for new employees at our associated companies. Despite being a light drinker, I couldn't refuse the alcohol offered to me and ended up feeling sick from drinking too much. As I shrank into a corner seat, looking for a chance to leave, George noticed me, struck up a conversation, and arranged a taxi for me. Later, I took a day off to thank him at his office. He was surprised to see me during his break. "Coming all this way just to say thanks? You're really conscientious." We became friends, started dating, and eventually got married. Both of us, George, who grew up in a complex environment, and I, who lost my parents as a child, longed for a warm family. We were sure that we could be happy together, but living together brought unexpected turmoil due to George's sister, Susan. Before the wedding, I tried to greet Susan, but she was too busy to meet, so our first encounter was at the wedding. Since George's parents had passed away, it was a simple ceremony with friends and relatives. Susan stood out in various ways, wearing a pure white dress that emphasized her cleavage at a wedding and sporting heavy makeup like a stage actress. She reeked of perfume. I tried not to show my disgust, but Susan either noticed or didn't like me from the start. She didn't greet me and mocked me. "George, couldn't you find someone better at your workplace? Such a plain Jane as a sister-in-law is embarrassing." "Come on, sis. Well, maybe she suits you, Mr. Super Serious." George looked ready to confront Susan, but a sibling fight on the wedding day seemed like a bad omen. "I'm fine, let's go and prepare." I forced a smile and led George to the staff. That was our terrible first impression, but I didn't think much of it, expecting to meet only at occasional family events. However, the situation soon took a drastic turn. After a short marriage due to her husband's infidelity, Susan unexpectedly moved in with us. My ex left, and I want to move out too. Our parents sold their place when I got married, so I can't go back to my parents. Can I stay at George's place for a while? George was visibly frustrated with Susan's call. "Seriously, why don't you rent an apartment? You got a lot of alimony, right? Just let me stay until I find a nice place. I want to take my time choosing, not settle for some rundown house like you guys." But 20 years old. Really, even if it's got a yard and a garage, I wouldn't want it enough if it's earthquake reinforced and remodeled. Just rent a weekly apartment. Kidding. You're so serious. I'll be there this weekend. My lease is up. In the end, Susan showed up with her stuff and settled in without asking. The main problem was her lack of awareness that she was being taken care of by us. Susan acted like it was her own house, causing George and me considerable distress. Susan would go out every night, sleep in until the afternoon, and then spend the rest of the day lounging on the living room sofa, playing with her phone, or mindlessly watching TV. This routine would continue until she went out again after dinner. I sometimes took a day off and stayed home, so I know this was her daily routine. When I would come home tired in the evening after a full day's work, Susan would ask me in a dissatisfied tone, "Hey, is dinner ready yet? How long till it's done?" "In about 30 minutes. That long? Hurry up, will you?" She would also make snide remarks about my cleaning, saying things like, "You're not very good at this," or "You're cutting corners." I share the cleaning duties with George. You know he's tired too. As a wife, you should be doing all the household chores. I didn't want to complain to George about Susan and worsen their sibling relationship, but he eventually noticed my growing unhappiness. When George asked and I told him about Susan's behavior, he became furious. "Listen, Susan, don't you dare overstep your boundaries. You're just a guest here." "Oh, I'm just stating the obvious," Susan replied nonchalantly. "And start contributing to the household expenses. I'm still in shock from my husband's cheating. How can I work in this state, and now you want to charge me? You can afford it with the $100,000 alimony you got. You have enough money to buy clothes and go out drinking. I don't need my brother telling me how to spend my money." With Susan acting like this, both George and I were exasperated. My dream of a happy married life had turned into a nightmare because of Susan. George and I had wanted kids soon, but perhaps due to the stress over Susan, it just wasn't happening. We were discussing getting checked when I discovered I was pregnant in our 4th year of marriage. Tears of joy streamed down our faces. George took this opportunity to suggest Susan move out. "Susan, we're going to need more space when the baby comes. Maybe it's time you move to your own place." Susan turned to me and asked, "Alice, what are you going to do about work?" "I plan to return to work after a year of parental leave." "Well, I can look after the baby." "What? No, we're planning to use daycare. Don't you know everywhere around here is full?" After inquiring at the city office and asking other moms at work, I found out that even the non-licensed daycares had over a year's waitlist. "See, I told you so." A few months later, as my belly began to show, Susan smugly said, "I'll take care of the baby until you get a daycare spot. I owe you, and I'll do it for free. It'll be tough on your finances if you quit your job right." After discussing it, George and I reluctantly agreed to let Susan help. Honestly, I was extremely anxious, but surprisingly, Susan took great care of our newborn Joshua. She prepared well by looking up childcare information online, took care of his meals and daily needs, and even took him to parks and community centers. She devoted herself to Joshua. It was evident from how much Joshua adored Susan. Even after our second son, Ethan, was born 2 years later, Susan's dedication didn't change. With George and me busy with work, we were grateful for how much she helped with the kids. But as the boys grew, they started to avoid us more and more openly. Joshua, Ethan, want to go to the amusement park at the end of the month. "We're going with Susan." "How about we go out for a barbecue for Ethan's birthday? You mentioned wanting to go before, right?" "Susan already took us to a fancy barbecue place for my birthday. We're going to a high-end sushi restaurant. Can't wait." George and I felt torn seeing our sons so excited about spending time with Susan. Even after Joshua and Ethan started elementary school, we were grateful to Susan for spending time with them on our workdays, even on weekends. When George and I are home, Joshua and Ethan stick close to Susan. They don't try to talk to us and act like it doesn't matter whether we're there or not, playing games and going out with her. Things got worse as Joshua got older. He would blatantly show his displeasure, ignore us, or even click his tongue when we tried to talk to him. Once, Joshua started eating while playing on his phone, and when I reprimanded him, he glared and snapped at me. "Shut up, old lady." For a moment, I couldn't believe my ears. Man, it would have been great if Susan was our mom. She always gives us money and takes us places. Yeah, totally, being born to parents like ours was a total bust. I was shocked by their words but tried to stay calm as I responded, "Susan doesn't work despite being healthy, doesn't contribute financially, and just spends her ex-husband's alimony. So what? That's a lifestyle to aspire to," Joshua said, looking dreamy. "But, like, Susan raised us right. Complaining about her seems weird." "Yeah, you guys didn't really want kids, did you?" "What? I know Susan told us you had us just because you had to." "That's not true. George and I have always wanted kids. Susan offered to help until we found childcare." I was desperate in my denial. "I can't believe you'd say that to me." Joshua smirked at my choked voice. "You guys are always so annoying, telling us to do homework, saying we play too many games." "Yeah, Susan gets it. She says it's fine not to do homework and even stays up with us playing games till dawn." I snapped back, annoyed. "Susan has no responsibility for your futures. Your dad and I say these things because we're worried about you, even if it means you'll hate us. Yeah, right. You're just jealous because we're close to Susan. How stupid. Maybe you shouldn't have let her take care of us. I felt like crying. Looking up, I saw George standing in the doorway, his fists trembling. Who do you think you're talking to? Oh, hey Dad. Working late again today? Must be tough. Yeah, for such a measly salary, Joshua added. The boys laughed mockingly, leaving George speechless. Finally, you talk to us, and it's to mock your parents. George, stop being so loud, Susan called out as she came down from her room and appeared in the kitchen, shrugging her shoulders in annoyance. Getting worked up over what kids say is so immature. It's because you spoil them that they're like this, George exploded. I've had enough. Get out now. What? I've been nice to my nephews, and this is the thanks I get. If you're going to stay, then pay your way. Susan puffed up her cheeks. Fine, I'll leave. Happy now. What, Susan, you're really leaving? No way. Susan quickly agreed, went to her room to pack her things in a suitcase, and came down to the entrance. I put my clothes in boxes. I've arranged for movers this weekend. Leave it till then, okay? Susan, are you really going? Yes, take care. She smiled at Joshua and Ethan as they saw her off to the gate, then left. But it was too late to bridge the gap between us and our sons. As teenagers, Joshua and Ethan became more rebellious. Joshua quit his job within a month of starting after high school, and 2 years later, Ethan followed suit, quitting his job after just a few days. They bragged about starting a business together and engaged in dubious deals, spending money from odd jobs in a single night. After a huge fight, George kicked them out of the house. When you get a job, come back. No way, we'll never come back to this place. And so Susan, who had stirred up our family, and the sons she influenced, Joshua and Ethan, left. It was back to just my husband and me. I worried about how Joshua and Ethan were doing, but without the three of them causing chaos, I breathed a sigh of relief. At the end of that year, as I was about to leave work and head home, I received a call from George's colleague. Are you Alice? George collapsed at work. What? He's currently receiving treatment in the ICU at the city hospital. I understand. I'll go there right away. I felt like I was about to panic, but I ordered myself to calm down and drove to the hospital. I identified myself at the IQ reception, waited in the hallway for a while, and then the automatic doors opened. A man in a white coat, presumably a doctor, appeared. As soon as he saw me, he lowered his gaze to the floor. We did our best, but I'm sorry. I was speechless, overwhelmed by shock. I stood there in place, trying to process the news. This morning, I had seen off George as he left for work, just as always. Keep your schedule open for our anniversary next month. Sure, the usual restaurant. I have a surprise planned for this year. It's the same restaurant, though. I never imagined that such a mundane conversation would be our last. It felt like my field of vision suddenly turned completely gray. Am I the only one left living? Is there any meaning to it? As I pondered these ominous thoughts, I decided to contact everyone anyway. I informed Joshua, Ethan, and Susan that George had passed away. I left a voicemail and sent a message. That night, I received a return call from Joshua. Amidst cheerful music and chatter in the background, it seemed like he was having dinner at a restaurant. Joshua, your father has. My voice trembled as I spoke. Joshua replied with a half-laugh, the funeral and stuff. I'll leave it to you, Mom. Someone who kicked us out like that. I don't even want to see his face. Yeah, we're having fun here, so don't bother us. Oh dear, George really made himself unpopular, didn't he? I could hear Susan chuckling in the background. Just tell the relatives we're absent because of work. Say hi to them for us. Wait just a minute. I stood in shock, holding the phone. Are these people really George's sister and sons? Filled with emptiness, I knew I had to proceed with the funeral arrangements. I contacted George's relatives and the funeral home we always used, arranging a family funeral. The sudden farewell felt unreal, and I couldn't shed a tear during the service. However, as normal life resumed, the reality of losing George hit me repeatedly. While preparing dinner, setting up to record a TV drama we used to watch together, making coffee, I'd inadvertently prepare for two or start talking to him, and then realize George was no longer there. I couldn't stop the tears. A week after George's passing, I was watering the flowers in the garden when the mailman's car arrived. I took the mail and went inside. Among the usual junk mail, I found an envelope addressed to me. The distinctive handwriting was unmistakably George's. With a rush of emotion, I opened the envelope. First, it explained why I was receiving this letter. I entrusted an old friend to post this in case I passed away. After a heartfelt message of gratitude for the years we spent together, there was a line that caught my eye. Please read this without our sons finding out. My heart swelled as I continued reading. I felt a warmth in my eyes. Realizing George had seen how much I worried about the kids, I wiped my tears and made a decision. I had to respond to George's feelings. Susan, who had trampled on our family without care, and Joshua and Ethan, who refused to attend their father's funeral. Just you wait. I won't let it end like this. I immediately took action. George's letter said, "There's a package for you in a safety deposit box at the bank near the station. Use the enclosed key to retrieve it. I'll leave the rest to you, Alice." Using the address in the letter, I went to the bank and entered the safety deposit box room beside the ATMs. Nervously, I inserted the card into the slot. After entering the PIN, a square part of the table opened, revealing the safety deposit box George had rented. I used the key to open the box and check its contents. Sure enough, everything George mentioned in his letter was there. I put them in my bag and left the bank. Later, I invited Susan, Joshua, and Ethan to my house. "I want to share George's inheritance with everyone who was important to him," I said. With that excuse, all three of them came eagerly. Without a doubt, the word shameless fit them perfectly, skipping the funeral but wanting the inheritance. How audacious could they be? Susan, who couldn't wait while I was making tea, blushed and started talking. That stinky, low-earning George had an inheritance, huh? Maybe he had hidden assets because he was stingy. Thinking about it, being stingy might not be so bad. I wonder if he transferred his inheritance to some account. Anyway, I'm excited. Then Susan smiled at me. "You did the right thing letting your sister-in-law know." "Well, I suppose." "Mom, stop beating around the bush. His dad's inheritance jewels. Maybe gold bars?" Joshua and Ethan fidgeted eagerly. I forced a smile before saying, "Please listen to this." I placed an IC recorder on the dining table beside George's cell phone. Joshua, Ethan, and Susan looked puzzled. "What's this?" Susan asked, eyeing the recorder. "It's an IC recorder," I said. "You know, the kind used for investigations. I've seen them on TV." Joshua chuckled rudely. "Wait, did Dad have an affair?" His laughter died as I pressed the play button. The phone began to emit Joshua's voice, speaking to a friend. "Yeah, remember that old lady you met at our house? Her name's Susan. She wears so much makeup and clings to me, calling me Joshua dear. It's gross, but she'll hand over money if you flatter her. You know, there's a use for fools and old ladies." Susan's face went from puzzled to furious. She glared at Joshua, who now looked frozen. "What is this?" she demanded. "Joshua, what's going on?" Joshua stammered, "I don't know. Maybe it's a stranger or Dad did a voiceover or something." Susan shouted, "George was too tech illiterate to do something like this." Suddenly, she declared, "I just remembered something I need to do. I'm leaving." As Susan and Joshua argued, Ethan tried to sneak out. Before he could make his escape, I played the second recording. "How much money did you get from Susan?" The recording began. $22,000. "Damn, I only got $5,000, Joshua's voice continued. "What did you do?" "Gave her a bouquet of roses and a high-end bag for her birthday. Maybe I'll give her a fake designer brand she won't notice." "Yeah, she's so easy to deceive," Ethan's voice joined in. The recording continued. "She lives for being showered with gifts from men, even though she's almost 60. She still thinks she's young, believing every compliment she gets from men at the bar. She's a real easy target." Joshua and Ethan's laughter filled the room as they continued to mock Susan. I stopped the playback, and Ethan, with a forced smile, muttered defensively, "When did Dad record this? And to expose it to Mom after he's gone? That's just mean." "Yeah," Susan said, trying to deflect. "Pretending to be a good guy when he's gone, those are the ones you can't trust." The insults about George continued, making me furious. I was about to speak when Susan shouted, "You dare mock people who raised you since you were kids? Don't mess with me. See, this is what's so annoying about you. You always act like we owe you something." Joshua and Ethan laughed derisively. Susan's face flushed red with anger. "Now it's your turn, Susan," I said, reaching for the IC recorder. Susan's face tensed up as she braced herself. I pressed play and lively music filled the room, mixed with the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversation. Then Susan's high-pitched voice cut through, clearly audible over the noise. "That's right, I've had my nephews wrapped around my finger since they were little," she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "Filled their heads with all sorts of nonsense about their parents. Kids are so easy to manipulate." "Oh, Susan, you're so clever," praised a man's voice. Susan continued proudly, "I'm single and need them to take care of me in my old age. Look at my nephews, they're so handsome, like models or pop stars." The host, now intrigued, responded, "Wow, that's impressive." Susan's voice became more animated. "I dream of them feeding me, taking me on amusement park dates, even changing my diapers in the future. No way am I going into a facility. If I'm going to be looked after, it's going to be by handsome men only. I can't wait." I stopped the playback and looked at Susan, whose gaze was fixed on the floor. Joshua and Ethan watched her intently, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. "So both my brother and his wife had some pretty nasty hobbies," I said. "Susan, you've been gallivanting around while I've heard rumors from relatives, and got curious. After all, the alimony from your ex should have run out after 20 years. Yet you remained unemployed, so I hired a private investigator to look into your background. And this is what was recorded." Susan's face grew red with anger. "You think this is funny? It's creepy. I did dot on you and spent my time and money. What's wrong with expecting something in return?" I spread out a bank statement on the table. "Oh, you mean this?" Joshua and Ethan's eyes sparkled with interest as they saw the document. "Is this finally the inheritance?" "Well, sort of," I said, making a pointed glance at Susan, who was visibly sweating and desperately searching for an escape route. Her face betrayed a clear desire to flee. I turned to Joshua and Ethan. "Remember what I told you about George cutting ties with his father before we got married?" "Yeah, I remember," Joshua said, nodding. "Our grandfather, Dad's father, didn't work seriously despite being wealthy. He relied on the family fortune and accumulated a huge debt. George's mother worked herself to death paying off those debts, right, Susan?" Susan nodded, her discomfort evident. "Yes, that's right. I cut ties with him too after I became an adult, although I did attend his funeral. So after that," I continued, "the inheritance George received from wealthy relatives was kept a secret. He deposited it into an account for you three." "We never heard about this," Joshua said, his interest piqued. "If there was money, why didn't he tell us?" "He planned to tell you once you started working seriously," I explained. "But before that could happen, someone used the money without permission." Joshua and Ethan turned their gazes to Susan. "No way," they said in unison. "Yes, Susan had been using George's bank book and seal without permission, withdrawing money," I revealed. The bank book showed a balance drop from $200,000 to $10 in just 1 year. Joshua and Ethan stared at it in disbelief. "What did you spend it on?" Joshua demanded. "Well, this guy convinced me there was a great investment opportunity," Susan replied defensively. "I thought I could double it and pay it back. I just borrowed it." Joshua and Ethan erupted in anger. "Don't joke about it," Joshua shouted. "That was supposed to be our money. Just $200,000 and you're making a fuss." Susan retorted defiantly, "Considering all the effort I put into raising you, you should be giving it to me for free." Joshua and Ethan's faces flushed with rage, veins popping on their foreheads. "But that's not all, Susan," I said, sighing as I spread Joshua and Ethan's bank books on the table. You both started working right after high school, so the college funds were left untouched. I was going to give it to you once you started working seriously, but this turd has been tampered with. Seeing only pennies left in their accounts, Joshua tore at his hair in frustration, and Ethan's eyes welled up with tears. Damn it, woman, what you're doing is criminal. Yeah, we'll sue you, Ethan added. Don't be silly, Susan said with a smirk. It's called family theft and doesn't count as a crime when done by a relative. I crossed my arms and glared at Susan. I've already called the police. Susan's eyes widened in shock. Huh? But relatives living together can't be charged for crimes. That's why George kicked you out. He was planning to report you, I said coldly. Susan stared at me in disbelief. You betrayed your husband's sister. Yes, that's what happened, I replied firmly. Unbelievable after all I've done for you. Susan's protest was cut short by my angry outburst. Who's ungrateful here? I shouted, silencing the room. I fixed my gaze on Susan, letting my frustration spill out. Look at what you've done. Our family is in ruins beyond repair. What do you plan to do about it? Susan, with a casual shrug, replied, I should have never trusted Ed and let you stay. I should have kicked you out sooner. Turning to Joshua and Ethan, she wore a malicious grin. I wanted to be a mother, but since I couldn't, I decided to take your mom away from you out of spite. Joshua and Ethan looked on in horror. Are you out of your mind? Just stay away from us, I demanded. Susan's smirk widened. Actually, I came here to borrow money. We're family, right? We should help each other in tough times. Joshua and Ethan, who had been seething moments earlier, suddenly adopted fake smiles. We're broke too. Got fired for talking back at work and taking an unscheduled break. Now we're out of our apartment and need to stay here for a while, Joshua said nonchalantly. Can you lend us $40,000? We'll pay you back once we're out of debt. Their audacity made my blood boil. Don't joke around. I have nothing to give to the heartless sons who skipped their father's funeral. Despite my refusal, they persisted. Please, Mom, if you don't help us, we'll report you to the police. Just then, a police siren blared outside. Susan, panicking, stumbled into the officers at the door and was quietly escorted away. Are we going to get arrested too? Joshua asked in a panic. Let's just leave, Ethan said, glancing at me with resignation. They abandoned their pleas for money and left. Joshua and Ethan soon realized that the funds Susan had given them were actually from George and their own savings. They had lost all respect for Susan. I don't want to end up like them, they said, trying to convince themselves to work harder. But their laziness didn't vanish overnight, and they continued to bombard me with requests for money. Mom, I need money for bar payments, one would say. I blew my money on horse racing. Can you lend me $100,000? Frustrated, I blocked their contact information. They sought help from other relatives but were shunned and condemned for missing their father's funeral. This led to further estrangement and debt collectors pursuing them. As Joshua and Ethan woke up to reality and started working diligently, their debts had already accumulated too much. They were banned from their favorite nightclubs and bars, losing all the enjoyment in their lives. They lamented their misfortune. Susan, a first-time offender, paid a fine and was soon released. However, the scandal led to her being dumped by her boyfriend. After repaying the embezzled money from George's accounts, she was left with significant debt. Now, she works from dawn till dusk, visibly exhausted. What I kept hidden from Susan and my sons was that George had left another item in the safe, a large pink diamond necklace, a prestigious heirloom passed down from his mother. George had intended it as a gift for our 30th wedding anniversary next year. Fearing it might be found and sold, he had kept it securely stored. Valued at $240,000, it was a treasured gift from George. Though I longed for a warm family, things didn't work out with my sons, and I lost my husband. Yet George's memory lives on in my heart. Moving forward, I want to live strong, cherishing the memories of George.